Thank you very much, Chairs Needleman and Steinberg, Ranking Members Fazio and Mara, and members of the Energy and Technology Committee. The House Republican Caucus appreciates this opportunity to offer testimony in support of Senate Bill 647, the act concerning protections for consumer access to affordable electricity. I have the privilege and disadvantage of going after Senator Harding, who I think really addressed a lot of the specificity that is in this bill. But I do want to take the opportunity to say, listening to the testimony, one of the things I tell people up here all the time is when you know better, you do better. I'm not here to re-legislate the Millstone contract. I'm not here to re-legislate 7006, take back your grid, right? All of those pieces of legislation were passed at a time with a majority. Doesn't matter who voted for it or not, and I don't get into the partisan back and forth of who led what, because everything in this building is passed by a majority, and if we're lucky, it's a bipartisan support. And those bills both had bipartisan support. So I'm not here to re-legislate that, but what I am here to say is, as you listen to this gentleman here, part of 7006, who just spoke, was the 96-hour agreement, right? You have acknowledged that 96-hour agreement did not do everything you thought it should do. And you are now taking action to change that. That is when you know better, you do better. And I think that's what this bill here specifically is asking for. There are things in this bill, as Senator Harding talked about, in regard to the public benefit fee, in regard to the incentive programming, in regard to the adjustment mechanisms and everything else. It's very detailed, and I am sure that you are all going to read it and look at it. What I would like to talk about is coming into this legislature post those bills and seeing what happened starting in July to our residents. A lot of these things came on board, a lot of these pieces of legislation, and having a lot of conversation with Commissioner Gillette, I would probably bet a paycheck that not everybody on this committee can tell me what those 54 to 57 pieces of legislation are that are in the public benefit fee. And I've had conversations with a lot of you personally to talk about the impact of these pieces of legislation. And I've heard every gamut from, we can't put it in the budget because it's volatile, till it belongs in the budget, and everything in between. But there are several things that are in our state budget that are volatile, whether it be Medicaid, whether it be employee health care, whether it be retiree health care, whether it just be our revenues, right? Volatility is not something for us to shy away from. The programs that we're mentioning in here and looking at, I like to equate them to, I pay taxes at a federal level and at a state level. I pay for SNAP benefits. I'm wholly supportive of SNAP benefits. But when I go to the grocery store and I check out at the end of the day, and my bill is $100 for half a bag of groceries these days, but $100, they don't say, give me your $100 and pay $30 for the next person in line. When I get my oil delivered to my house for my heating, I don't pay my $300 oil bill and then $35 for something else. These are programs that are priorities of the legislature. They are legislative agenda and driven priorities, just like every other part of our budget. And they should be continued as such. They should be reviewed as such. They should be negotiated, debated, bargained, tracked by our departments that handle these types of policies. So many people take pride in the fact that 2 years ago we passed the largest tax benefit, with largest tax, we gave the best tax credit ever since 1991 when the taxes went in place. Starting in July, we negated that. We negated it by over 100%. The average person is going to see between $450 and $600 in a tax break for the tax benefit that we passed. And on the same hand, July 1st, we are now charging them $600+ more in public benefit fees. We have negated what we gave people, and we are now making it harder for them to pay their electric bills. The part that's most frustrating about this is the bills had good intent. The low-income discount program has good intent. Millstone had good intent. I'm sure those 57 pieces of legislation had good intent. But when you look at what it's actually doing to the public right now, you have to step back and say, are we actually achieving the intent that we tried? And I don't think that anybody here could truly say that. If it's a priority, we make it work, right? And we have to have programming for people who can't afford it, but it shouldn't be your neighbor. And things like electric car charging, you know how many people have contacted me that they can't afford an electric vehicle, but they're paying for their neighbor's car charger? Like, these are, as Representative Mashinsky said, we're not saying you need to get rid of these programs. What we're saying is if this is a state of Connecticut legislative priority, then the state of Connecticut legislature should pay for it. And I shouldn't be asking my neighbor to pay for my electric car charger, right? Or my neighbor's electric car charger. Because all we're doing is creating animosity between our residents, because they do not feel like they are fairly being charged for just the electricity that they're using. They're being charged for their electricity, for somebody who can't afford their electricity, for their neighbor who has a Tesla's electricity. It doesn't have good public optics, and in my opinion, it's just not good legislative practice.
I think your paycheck is safe. I don't think anybody here knows all 57 elements here any more than we know the 57 ingredients in Heinz ketchup.
You know, there really weren't 57 ingredients.
And maybe there are not really 57 in the bill. But I think, and of course, if this was your legislative paycheck, it probably wasn't worth much to risk anyway. But I do want to contend with you on the issue of volatility.
Yes.
I don't find volatility particularly attractive. When businesses come to the state of Connecticut, they say they want predictability, virtually certainty. Volatility not only creates tension and anxiety, but also adds to costs. We find that everybody involved needs to de-risk that volatility, and that costs us more as well. So, what we're trying to do, and government often doesn't do it very well, is to create a pathway where there is greater predictability. And I'm very much afraid that if we shift these items into the general fund, we are putting them at much greater risk, knowing the volatility that may be coming our way in terms of the state budget. And that the key thing, maybe you didn't hear earlier because others had testified, is that the things that are in the public benefits typically are things that benefit ratepayers, not taxpayers, and that they are intended to influence behavior on the part of ratepayers that leads to conservation, which lead ultimately to lower rates for everybody. So you can hear the resistance in many of us, not so much just to defend the items that are in the public benefits, but we're very wary about moving it to the general fund. I came in 2011, it was a mess. We were cutting programs left and right. I also was very upset. One of the most upsetting things that's ever happened in the legislature, in my view, is when we basically stole the energy efficiency fund and used it to plug a budget gap. You know, it's sort of the old line, the government is killed and will kill again. I don't want to put these programs for energy efficiency and for some environmental protections at risk by putting them in the general fund, just as we're losing federal dollars, just when the stock market seems like it's about to fall off a cliff. So, I take your point. It sounds perfectly neutral in the scheme of things to move everything in the budget, to socialize it against all taxpayers. But one could easily argue that's not only regressive, but unfair to those who actually don't use all that much energy. And they're now paying the price that would have been paid by somebody whose bill would be higher because their usage was higher. So I am concerned by what you say. I'm never going to challenge you on anything to do with the budget. I'll leave that alone. But my projection of where this state will be in a couple of years makes me nervous. And this is just the wrong time to be making a well-intentioned move to the general fund, only to discover the general fund doesn't have the money to cover it going forward. And of course, we make choices, but we don't necessarily have to make choices in this case.
So, sir, I would come back and just say, if the state of Connecticut's $55 billion budget can't handle the volatility, what makes you think my neighbor can? Like, really? If we're saying that the state of Connecticut can't prioritize incentive programs and low-income discount plans, what makes you think the senior citizen that lives in your town can? Right? They have no predictability. It is all volatile. When people are opening their electric bills every month, they don't know what to expect. I know I went back and tracked the last year of my usage where the public benefit fee went from 7% to 30%. I now pay higher public benefits fee than I do for my supply. Granted, I got a good rate when I locked in at 8 cents per kilowatt hour, but still, my public benefit fee is higher than my supply. So why am I asking every resident who has an electrical bill to assume more volatility than I am willing to put forward in a state budget?